left-hand side of the seat now. So obviously, park brake, just like anything else, pull it up, push the button, push it back down, away you go. This is your rear PTO. So you've got 760 speed, 540 speed. So it may or may not line up while we're here. So we're in neutral now. Okay, so that's 540. Push it forward into neutral and then push it forward into 760. Okay, so that's pretty straightforward in that respect. When you're changing PTOs and gear speeds and that sort of stuff, a simple rule to remember is with your clutch pedal down here, we have clearance, okay? So you're about 15, 20 mil of clearance. There is a little sticker down here on the side which displays a little bit about clearance, see 20, 25 mil sort of thing, right? Very important, I class clutch clearance as a daily check, right? Because it takes that long, all right? If you don't have this any sort of clearance here, you don't have to have that much clearance, but you've got to have some sort of clearance. It's no different to driving around with your foot on the clutch without clearance, okay? If you don't have clearance, your clutch won't last because it's equivalent to having your foot on the clutch driving around all day and it's just going to burn the clutch. So realistically, daily check, because it takes 1 second to do. You've got a bit of clearance. So we have first stage, when you do this, you'll feel the clearance, okay? Then you'll feel the first stage, and then the last little bit, there's a shorter pedal. It's sort of got a lump in the pedal, okay? So first stage of the clutch disengages the first clutch plate. Second stage of the clutch disengages the first clutch plate and the second clutch plate. The second clutch plate is for the PTOs only, all right? So any rule of thumb, any motion of the tractor, forward, reverse, 1, 2, 3, 4, low, medium, high, is a first stage of the clutch. Anything to do with your PTO stick over here, engaging, disengaging, full press of the clutch, right till it hits the bottom on the stop on the floor sort of thing, okay? So that's your very bottom stop down there. Then you got to remember some of these gears are doing 1,000 RPM because it's still spinning with the engine, all right? So when you put your foot down on the clutch, you go 1, 2, 3, let the gears stop spinning, and then go clunk into gear sort of thing, okay? If you go clutch and in, you'll find the gears are still spinning. So one shaft's doing 0 RPM and the other one might still be doing 400 because it's still slow, it's slower down. But you're going to grate the gears, okay? So clutch, 1, 2, 3, okay, pop it into gear and away you go. Pop it back in the neutral. If you're just popping it out of gear into neutral, you don't necessarily, like you finish slashing the paddock, you don't necessarily have to clutch to take it out of gear and pop it into neutral. Like I usually just accelerate a little bit, and as you back off, you just push it forward out of gear. Same as popping a manual out of gear in a car without putting your foot on the clutch. So this one here, just a little bit of water on the floor from giving it a wash. There we go. So that's your full drive controls there, okay? So up, pull it up towards you, is in. You see a little picture there? Your centre diff is open on your four-wheel drive control, okay? When we push it down, it may or may not line up now because we're on the concrete car park. Yep, it's gone in, okay? So basically, the rod here, it's hard to see in the camera, but that's sitting flat now, okay? Lever's coming up on a 45-degree angle, and that one's flat. So that is engaged in four-wheel drive, all right? So winter time, if you're on hills, by all means, have it in four-wheel drive. It gives you traction, it gives you braking down hills. If you're going down the bottom end of the property and it's all swampy and that sort of stuff, well, ideally, yes, look, put it in full drive before you even drive in there. You don't need to try and get stuck. Once you're stuck, they're hard to get out, especially if the tractor bogs itself down to the belly. You get all the suction of the mud, and they can be quite difficult to get out. And believe me, I've got a few customers out before. You spend 2 days to get the tractor out of a bog hole. So ideally, if it's wet and sloshy and you don't like the look of it, stick it in four-wheel drive before you even go in there. And or don't even go in there if you should think about it that much. So realistically, down for four-wheel drive, up for two-wheel drive. When you engage this, I like the tractor to be driving when you engage it, because that way the gears are actually going to line up. So sometimes you might go to say disengage that, and what will happen is you're pulling it and it won't happen. Nothing. There's no. You can't pull it up towards you. It's hard to show you this without. Hang on, let me try and hold this camera. There we go. So if you imagine your gears are sitting like this, okay, it's never going to engage. So you need to be driving forwards and changing your front and rear ratios to let the gears line up, and then when they line up, they'll slide in together, okay? And then they're locked in together. So, and same thing, if you're in forward drive and you've just pulled up and done a U-turn, you got to imagine you've got a lot of side load on one of the gears because they're doing like this. One's trying to drive the other, so you've got all this side load, okay? So you won't disengage it because it's got side load. So if that happens, you can just pop it into reverse. So quite simply, pop it in the reverse back a couple of inches, and you'll notice straight away the lever will just flip back up. But have a little play with going in and out of full drive so you know what it feels like when you want it. If it's in full drive and you're on asphalt and hard packed ground in summertime, it's just binding up the drive line. It's no different to being out in the full drive on asphalt and low range. You do a U-turn, you can hear the tyres tearing the asphalt out of the ground and tearing the rubber out of the tyres. You use full drive in slippery, wet conditions, that sort of stuff. It's not just leaving in full drive forever. You eventually get driveline bind up and you can do damage to the driveline, especially if you're really on asphalt and that sort of stuff. So you put it in when you need it. If you're doing a bit of digging or you're pulling with a grader blade and you need that traction, you put it in as you need it. But you don't just leave it in full drive for the rest of its life, sort of thing. So pull it up and out, it's just back up and out like that. So very simple to pull it up. You do have a seatbelt on them, okay? All right, so ideally, especially while it's new, you should always use your seatbelt. You're getting used to controls and all that sort of stuff. You don't need to make a silly mistake. Your roll bar's here to save you, but the ironic thing is when you have a rollover on a tractor and you're not wearing a seatbelt, it's the roll bar that usually is what pins you to the ground, and it's trying to squish you and squish all the air out of your brake yarn. If you've got your seatbelt on, you might get a broken arm because it's pinned like this or something like that, but arms we can fix. The rest of the body doesn't fix very well, okay? So you protect your core unit when you're stuck in your seat and that sort of stuff, so that's the best way to go. Other controls we have on the driver's side. So under the cover here is your main fuse box. So there's a relay box, a fuse box and all that sort of stuff. You've got your two control levers here. Now if I can get the camera to focus. Okay, so we have position control, and then this one over here is draft control, okay? So if you look at the back picture there, all right, the plow, whatever you want to call it, the ripper is just a little bit above the ground. And you look at this picture down here and it's right in the ground, okay? So you can set this out one side when you've got a ripper on, up or down all the way. Okay, up is off for draft control, okay? That's off in that up position, so you use that, generally you'll leave that there unless you're using it, but when we spoke about the back, you've got those three holes that things line up on. They are realistically, this is how you set that draft control. So it gets to a certain point, it's forcing in the back of the tractor enough, then where you set this, once it hits that point, okay, it'll lift the implement up out of the ground, okay? So instead of bogging the tractor, if you're ploughing a field, you're on soft ground because you're re-driving over the same thing again, rather than bogging the tractor, it'll lift the implement up out of the ground. So great function if you're running pipes and all that sort of stuff. You're doing your pilot hole to run pipes. Otherwise, this one here is basically 3-point linkage up, 3-point linkage down. So bear in mind, if you leave that up here and then we turn around and start it up, that slash is going to come all the way up, and you run the risk of the arm coming up and hitting into the back of the tanks here and all this sort of stuff and damaging the back. So when the slash is on, you've got a couple of things to be wary of. Is underneath your PTO shaft, the slasher can come up and start to hit the slash if you lift them up too high. You only really need to lift it above the ground. You don't need it poking up here on a 45-degree angle. Okay, you just want to bring it up a bit so it's off the ground when you're driving around. So if you leave that up and start the tractor up, it's going to come up all the way by itself. And you buy a spray tank or put it on the back, and the spray tank comes up and bashes into the back of the tractor. My general rule of thumb I teach people is, when you buy any new attachment, okay, first thing you should do, lift it up slow.